this problem says, suppose that the quantity supplied S and the quantity demanded D of hot dogs at a baseball game are given by the following functions. So here's my S function, that's my supply function, and my demand function there. And it says where P is the price of a hot dog. So P is the price. So this is my price, and this is the quantity supplied, and that's the quantity demanded. Okay, so what we're going to do first is part A says find the equilibrium price for hot dogs at the baseball game. And then it says what is the equilibrium quantity. So we got to find two things here. We're finding a price and the equilibrium quantity. So that's two things. So the equilibrium quantity is my SP or DP. And my price is, of course, P. Okay, so let's get started with this. So the equilibrium price, to find that is where my S equals D. So that would imply then that negative 2,000 plus 3,000 P equals 10,000 minus 1,000 P. And I just have to solve for P here. So what I'm going to do first is add 1,000 to both sides, 1,000 P. And then I'm going to subtract, or add, I should say, 2,000 and add 2,000. Since I'm putting my P's on the left side, I got to get rid of this number term on that side there. So that's why I'm adding the 2,000. So I'm going to end up with 4,000 P equals 12,000. So then when I divide by 4,000, my P is going to equal 3. And it's a price, so I'm just going to call it $3. So the price for a hot dog is $3. That's the equilibrium price. Now we have to find the equilibrium quantity. So when I look for that, I just have to plug it in here. Now it doesn't matter which one I plug it into, because since I got the same P and it's an equilibrium price, they're going to also have the same Y value or the same quantity. Okay, so I'm just going to plug it in the top one, and it doesn't matter, I'm just doing it because it's the top one. So I'm going to look for S3. So that's going to be negative 2,000 plus 3,000 and 3 in for P. So that's going to be 9,000 there minus 2,000. So it's going to be 7,000. So the equilibrium quantity, and I'm just going to call it EQ, is going to equal 7,000 hot dogs. Because that's what we're talking about here. So that's the answer to the second part. All right, let's move on now. Let's move on to the part B here. Part B says, determine the price for which the quantity demanded is less than the quantity supplied. Quantity demanded is less than the quantity supplied. So if you just look at that, and I use variables for that, it's really D less than S. It says D is less than S. So that means my D is with 10,000. So this would imply 10,000 minus 1,000 P has to be less than my S, which is negative 2,000, plus 3,000 P. And then all I'm going to do is the same thing I did for the part A there, is I'm just going to solve this inequality. So I'm going to add 1,000 P to both sides. And I'm going to add 2,000 to both sides. So really, the same thing I did in the top. So now this is going to be 4,000 P on the right. And then on the left, I'm going to get 12,000. And then when I divide by 4,000, I'm going to get P is greater than 3. So where P is greater than 3, the quantity demanded is going to be less than supplied. So less people are going to want to buy the supply. It's going to be less demanding. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to part C here. So part C says, what do you think would eventually happen to the price of hot dogs if the quantity demanded is less than the quantity supplied? So again, my supply would be a lot larger or it would be not a lot larger, but it'd just be larger than the quantity demanded. So what would happen there is eventually the prices would have to decrease. So the price, oops, let me use my purple color. The price would eventually decrease. Oops. And if you think about it, that kind of makes sense. If you're selling a certain amount of hot dogs, but you have a lot more, you're going to have to go down in price to get rid of them because the amount demanded is less than the amount supplied. All right, now let's take a look at this next part. Now, there's not really a next part here, but I actually want to graph these because I want you to see how all this kind of plays together. So what I'm going to do is I have to set up my scale for this first. So if you look at this, this only goes to 9, so I'm going to make it go to 10. I just noticed that. So it's going to be positive 10. And this scale on this one's going to be 10,000. So my Y scale are going to be in thousands. My X scale are going to be in dollars. So that's going to be my setup here. And I only have to go to 10 bucks. So that's how I'm going to play around with this thing. So I wrote both of the functions there. And what I want to do is I just want to graph it. So remember my Y values, each one is 1,000. So that means for -2, my point then is going to be, let me get size 2. It's going to be here. All right, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to rise overrun this, and that's going to be a positive, 3,000, so 3,000 over 1. So I go up 3 and over 1, so it puts me here. That's going to be my next point. Now I just have to draw a line for that. So there's my supply. Now let's do the demand here. Okay, so the demand is going to be at 10,000 there. So that'll be up here. And then if I plug in 10 for P, that's going to make it 0. So my other point is going to be over here. So that's where my D is 0, or my DP, or my quantity demanded is 0. That's what I should say. Let's be official. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to graph that line. So then my equilibrium point would be here, and that's what we call the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity, and that's where they actually meet, those two lines, the supply and demand. And that point is 7,000. Now think about this here. If I had this line down the middle here, that's where my price was $3. And if I was looking where D was less than S, which is what we were looking for, that means S is bigger. And if I look at this, notice that line is above the other line here. So my supply line is above the demand line, so that makes sense there. So I just kind of wanted you to see the graph all together here so you can see how it all kind of comes together. And that's the equilibrium point. So that's really what we learned early on in algebra, where we had to solve the system of equations. So that's essentially what we did here, and they call that the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity, where SP equals DP. So there's our answers. And again, we didn't need that graphing part. I just kind of want to show that to you for those that might kind of be interested or do better with visuals. So there it is.